Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. This is Ashley Gatewood, the Communications and Marketing Manager at CFRE International. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm also joined by Phillip Rothwell, a CFRE working in a school in the UK, and he will share his experience a little bit later in the webinar about being a CFRE. So we have the question pane on the right. Feel free at any point in time to type your questions in there. I'm going to stop periodically and answer questions that have come in, and we'll also have some Q&A time at the end. So we're really excited that you're with us today and look forward to the dialogue. I'll begin with some FAQs. So we are recording today and everybody is muted, and I will send you a link to this recording within 24 hours via email. We can't answer really specific questions on this webinar. So for instance, if you say, I went to this conference that was put on by the French Fundraising Association in 2016, how many points is that worth? That's just kind of beyond the scope of what we can cover here, but you can definitely email us those questions and we'll have a little more time to look into those. We will also discuss the impact of COVID-19 and how it's affecting the CFRE process. I'll reference a few materials today, the candidate handbook, test content outline, and glossary. Those are all available for free on our website. And we are able to give you 1 point today in non-fundraising education towards the education requirement for the CFRE. So with that, also discuss the cost here. So if you are a member of a participating organization, and I'm going to explain what those are a little bit further into today's presentation, you have a discounted cost for the CFRE. So it's usually US $700. I did the exchange rate yesterday, so you can see what it's coming up in euro and pounds on your screen here. So just keep that in mind. That is the price currently. With fluctuations, it might bob around a little bit, but that's where we generally are at the minute. So if you would like to, in the chat, if you would like to tell us what country you are joining us from, that would be excellent. And we'll see where folks are on the line from. So if you find that chat panel on the right and you want to type in where you're joining us from. All right. Okay, great. I see we've got a couple people. Fabulous. All right. So I'll go ahead and we'll talk about what the CFRE certification is. We are the only globally recognized accredited certification for fundraisers. So if you earn this certification in the UK and then your career takes you to Canada, it has the exact same weight, right? If you earn it in Germany, it has the exact same weight as somebody who has earned it in Dubai. It's transferable wherever your career takes you. And that's also great too if you work for an organization that has offices around the world. We have currently 7,200 CFREs worldwide, so it's not a huge number, but the advantage of that for people who are CFREs is that they do truly stand out when they're on the job hunt or they're putting in applications to speak at conferences, that kind of a thing. And we've been on the scene almost 40 years. We've got great longevity. And so sometimes people think, well, why would I want to pursue becoming a CFRE? I've been fundraising for X number of years. I'm meeting my targets. Things are going well. Well, there are a couple reasons. A really main one why people go for their CFRE is to demonstrate their fundraising knowledge, right? Everybody, when they start a job or they're on a team, they say, oh, I've been on such and such course. I've been in the field for 9 years. But what's really the proof in the pudding? How can you really prove that you know what you know? And that's one thing that a certification does, because that's measuring your knowledge of fundraising. And it improves your fundraising knowledge. We hear this time and time again from people that go through the CFRE process that say, while I was studying, I learned things that I then turned around and I used the next week in my job. The studying process, which I'll get into a little further down the line, will help you identify any gaps in your fundraising knowledge so that you can be sure to address them, which will overall make you a stronger fundraiser. And obviously that makes you a more valuable asset to your organization. The smarter you are, the more confident you are in your fundraising, that only trickles down into your workplace and the great work that you can do there. We also hear from CFREs frequently that it was just a personal challenge they wanted to take on. People say, I thought I knew all this stuff, but I really want to know if I know all this stuff. If you manage a team, if you're at a director or manager level, you want to be setting a precedent for your team, right? So if you are that person holding the certification, if you are that person committed to professional development, then that is setting a great example for your team and inspiring those folks to also step up their professional development and their body of knowledge around fundraising. A number of CFREs tell us, I'm just a lifelong learner. I just always want to be learning. And for that reason, the CFRE was a natural fit because I want to keep up to date on my fundraising anyway. So why not go for the certification in the process? And then during job seeking. So in the EMEA region, the CFRE does not necessarily have as much recognition as it does in some other parts of the world. However, what we do hear from people is they'll put CFRE on their email signature, their business card, their CV, and a recruiter or the hiring manager will say, I saw that this said certified fundraising executive or this said CFRE. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? And then that becomes the entry to show why you've differentiated yourself by earning this certification. We have two main pieces to initial certification. One is the application and two is the exam. So the rest of this presentation is really divided into these two pieces, and we'll get started with looking at the application. There are three parts to the application, and the main one that takes people the most time to work on is the education requirement. The application is done on a point system, and for education, you need to have earned 80 points within the last 5 years. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, thanks, Ashley, that's great, but what is a point? Well, there are all kinds of ways to earn points, and a main one for folks is education sessions. So 1 point equals 1 hour in a session. You go on a 3-hour corporate sponsorship course and there's no breaks. It's just a straight 3 hours. That's 3 points. If you go on a 3-hour sponsorship course, but there's a 30-minute break for morning tea, then that's actually now 2.5 hours, right? We have to subtract out those breaks. If you ever present, you can earn 2 points per hour with previously developed materials. And if you create a new presentation, the very first time that you present it, we will give you 3 points per hour. And we can take up to 36 points maximum for presenting. So, right now we know the conference landscape has changed greatly, and some of it's for the better. There's so many virtual conferences happening right now. There's so many free webinars that in a sense right now you have more access than ever before to world-class fundraising education. So it could even be outside of your home country, but all of these online fundraising courses, conferences, webinars, they can all count towards this. So you don't have to worry about travel time or cost of hotels or anything now, right? To go to conferences, you can, from the comfort of your own home, be earning these education points. We can also take up to 10 points for relevant non-fundraising education. And I always have to stress relevant because we've seen some crazy things on applications. We've seen people try to get points for chocolate making classes and yoga or attending yoga classes, right? What we need is something that we can draw a really direct line from your fundraising job to the course you went on. So maybe it is how to polish your leadership skills. Maybe it is managing various generations in the workforce. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for in that non-fundraising education. And everything needs to be at least 45 minutes to count. So for instance, sometimes now you'll see in conferences, they'll have these little 15-minute drive-through kind of sessions. Those would be too short to count. We do need the webinar, the lunch and learn, whatever it is, to be at least 45 minutes. Another way that you can earn points in education is via service learning, which is essentially our term for volunteering, and you can earn up to 10 points for this. You can earn 1 point per year per organization as a volunteer. So if you volunteer 2 months out of the year with the NSPCC, then that's 1 point per year per org that you've done that. You don't necessarily have to have done it for the full 12 months because there are a lot of volunteering activities that aren't 12 months long, right? It might be a walk for the cure. It might be a fundraising event where you're helping out for 3 days. So just keep that in mind. There's not necessarily a minimum or a maximum amount of time that you would need to be participating as a volunteer. And then if you serve on a committee or a board, you can get 2 points per year per org. We also can give you points for any degrees that you have, like a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctoral degree. Now, as I said before, everything needs to happen within the last 5 years to count, but this is our big exception here. You can earn your bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree from any year in any major, right? So I have a bachelor's in English from 2002. That's going to give me 10 points. I also have a master's in advertising from 2005. That's going to give me 10 points. We can combine those degrees in any way. So if you have a double major, you earned yourself 2 bachelors, then you would get 10 points for each of those bachelors, and we can take up to 40 points from degrees. But I do want to stress, you don't have to have a degree to become a CFRE. If you don't have one, that's totally fine. It just happens to be a way that you can earn some points if that's relevant to you. People often wonder, okay, well, there's so many kinds of education out there. What exactly counts? And you can see on your screen here, there are heaps and heaps of ways that you can earn these points. So if you go on even a Blackbaud training, right, for if you're using Razor's Edge in your organization, if you attend a panel discussion, a roundtable, if you've gone on a certificate course, say it's through IOF or another body, all of those are going to earn you points. So a lot of people are very pleasantly surprised to find that when they start thinking about the education that they've done and what they've participated in, they actually tend to have more points than they think they had. There are some things, though, that will not count. This main one that trips people up is presentations you make for work, right? So we can give you points for presenting, but we can't give you points for presenting what is related to your job. If at your next board meeting, you present for an hour on the latest that's happening in your fundraising department, that's you doing your job, right? That's not a presentation in the style that would be eligible for this. If you present non-fundraising material, so if you're teaching a class on generational differences in the workforce, that would not count because we need to see that the presenting has been done solely on fundraising information. And anything that happened more than 5 years ago with that exclusion of your academic degree. So if in 2014 you went to 10 conferences, unfortunately, all of that would have aged out because that would be more than 5 years ago. Networking events, they don't count because they don't have an agenda. The same thing with an awards event. There's usually not really fundraising instruction. If you have a mentor and you meet, we can't count that. And listening to podcasts, that's another one. So if you listen to recordings of conference sessions, that will count. But if you're listening to a podcast where people are chewing the fat over something, that will not count. I mentioned this a little bit before, but you will want to subtract out all of the non-education time. Essentially what that means is when you go to a conference and you look at that agenda, you might be thinking, okay, hot dog, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., this conference is running and I'm going to get myself 7 CFRE points. But conferences have lunch breaks. They have networking time in the exhibit hall. They have receptions. You might have to miss a session because you're taking a phone call. So those need to be subtracted out because what we do need to see is the time that you are actually learning. If you submit an application and you say that you were in a one-day course for 7 or 8 or for 8 hours, we will automatically send that back and request a copy of the agenda. So that's just something to keep in mind and make sure you subtract that stuff out. A lot of people get a little nervous at this stage because they think, I've not been keeping track of what I attended. I'm sure I probably have 25 points hanging out over the things that I've done in the last several years, but I really can't remember them all. There are a lot of great ways to jog your memory. You can go through your old calendars, your old emails, credit card statements, expense reports. You can contact the organizer. So this isn't new to them. A lot of people get contacted about this kind of a thing. You could say, hey, I was at that Case Europe conference and I need a copy of the agenda to figure out how many points it was worth when I attended in 2018. So don't be shy, but you're fundraisers, so I know you're not shy. You're lovely and extroverted. All right, so we have our first question break here. And I've got one question here. I worked in fundraising from 2003 to 2012 and came back into the profession in 2019. Can I count any of my previous time? That is a great question, and that kind of preempts our next section. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. Okay, great. So that was our only question that came in, and I will get to that in just a second here. So professional practice is you working, and this is the requirement that you need to have been in a fundraising role. This is 36 points, super easy to remember, right? 1 point equals 1 month. So if you've been working 36 months out of the most recent 5 years, that's what we need to see. If you're a consultant, you need to start counting from the date of your first client. Let's say you started your consultancy in March of this year, but you didn't secure your first client until May. You would start counting your time as a consultant from May, because if you're just getting your website up and your logo done and all of that good foundational stuff for your business, that doesn't count because you're not technically fundraising until you have a client. 50% or more of your duties need to be fundraising related. If you wear the marketing hat half the time and the fundraising hat half the time, or maybe 25% of your day is spent on PR and 75% on fundraising, that's totally fine. We completely understand. So as long as half of your time is on fundraising, that will be fine. Now, if you work 20 hours a week, 100% of your duties need to be fundraising related. And this does need to be a paid professional job. So if you're doing volunteer fundraising where you're not paid for an organization, that is not going to count. And if you're not there, if you're still working towards those 36 points, that's totally fine. You can begin your application anyway as you tick along and get those points with your 36 months. Now, the third piece of the application is professional performance, and this is the funds that you have brought in. Now, folks in Europe have a really fabulous advantage because everything that we do is in US dollars when we're measuring, and the reason for that is that we're accredited, and so we're only allowed to have one monetary standard for the globe. And with the exchange rate, folks on the euro or the pound have a very good situation going, right? You need to have earned 55 points within the last 5 years, but 1 point equals 25,000 US dollars. We have a currency converter inside the application, so you do not need to worry about, doing the math on all of this yourself. So don't worry about that. But obviously, with the exchange rate, you have a very nice advantage. If you're counting events, report the gross that came in. And if you're looking at bequests, they need to have been received or an irrevocable pledge. So you can't say, okay, this major donor called me up and said they were going to leave us 600,000 euro in their will. I'm going to count that towards my CFRE. That money needs to have come in, or that pledge has got to be irrevocable in writing. You can also earn points through management or communications projects, and this really applies to people who are in smaller shops that find it difficult to meet this 55-point requirement through funds raised alone. That dollar amount works out to be 1.375 million US dollars over 5 years. And what we're looking at is what the team that you're on has raised. We know that if you send out a fabulous direct mail piece and it brings in 200,000 pounds, it's impossible to say, okay, well, Gemma brought in 20,000 pounds of that, and so brought in 40,000 pounds of that, right? You can't, there's no way to divide that out. So if you're on the team and that team brought in that 200,000 pounds through the DM piece, then you can count that 200,000 pounds for your fundraising within the application. If you do decide to go the avenue of management or communications projects, we offer 5 points per project, and they must have a start and end date. So it can't just be, oh, I send out my e-newsletter every Thursday and that's a project. That's not a project, right? That's your job. A project has to have a proper start and end date. And we have plenty of examples on our website that are actual examples of ones that we've accepted on people's applications. So you can have a look there if you're interested. One of the biggest trip ups that people have with the CFRE is oftentimes storing their documentation, and that's when they can't remember what they attended. What we recommend is that in your personal email, you start a folder and call it CFRE Proof, and then just save all of the soft copies of your event agendas there. If you have hard copies and you want to keep them somewhere in your office, that's totally fine. But you would want to send all of your confirmation emails, agendas, receipts to the CFRE Proof folder. We do audit 10% of applications, so there's a 90% chance you won't be audited, and it's completely random. It just picks every 10th application. If you get audited, don't worry about it. A member of our certification team will work one-on-one with you to make sure you have everything that you need, but you will need to show these agendas, receipts, etc. So just make sure you're keeping those. Now, I mentioned before that we have participating organizations that we work with that allow you to get a discount, right? That's that $700 US rate. Our EMEA partners are the Association of Fundraising Consultants in the UK, the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the European Fundraising Association, also known as EFA. One of the wonderful things about EFA is that they have a whole bunch of country-specific associations that are members, right? So if you're a member of any of these organizations that are on your screen right now, you are going to be eligible for that 20% discount. And in your application, you would just say you're an EFA member. And that's how you'll get it. All right. So that initial cost, like we said, was $700 US for participating organization members, and it's $875 US at the regular rate. There's no cost at all to start your application. You can start it, poke around, add some information. If you're still on the fence, contemplating if you want to do your CFRE, I always say just start your application anyway, because one awesome thing that you can do, right? You're going to track all your professional development in there. And if you are tracking that, let's just say you start with this year. When you have your annual review with your boss, sometimes it's really hard to remember all the things you attended. But if you've kept them all in your CFRE application because you've been logging them as you go, you can go into that annual review and say, I was on these 9 webinars, I went to these 2 conferences, I went to this IOF event, whatever. So it has a value in the application just beyond purely being the application. What does that fee include? Well, it includes a review of your application, and there's no cost to resubmit it. So if we say, what, you put something in fundraising education that doesn't count, and we have to send the application back to you, and then you resubmit it, we're not going to charge you anything. So don't worry about that. When you become a CFRE, you will get a digital badge that you can put on LinkedIn. All the testing fees are included. So when you go to the test center, you're not going to be required to bring any money or make any kind of a payment there. And then also the printing and mailing of your certificate. So it's just one inclusive price. And now I'm going to turn it over to Phillip, who is a CFRE, and we are very pleased to have him here today. So thank you, Phillip. I will turn it over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Phillip Rothwell and I'm a UK fundraiser. I work at an independent school in the Midlands, 2,500 pupils. I've been here for nearly 10 years actually, but I started my career in fundraising back in 2005, shortly after I graduated from university. So I in the UK, and one of those people who actually went into fundraising from the very start of my career. And I think over the last few years, a lot more people have done the same. And I wanted to really learn and develop in the profession of fundraising and philanthropy. And there wasn't really many guides back then. It's become a lot more professional since, particularly in education sector. But I was really keen to develop a career path and really build my understanding of the sector and knowledge. And of course, I could go to lots of workshops and conferences and network with people, but I was really looking for something that provided me with a pathway throughout my career that I could then hold up and attest to the fact that I'm a professional fundraiser, emphasis on the professional, and a sense of personal pride, but also something where people, if they look at me on LinkedIn or wherever, they would recognize that I've gone through a rigorous system to actually develop myself. So I think particularly in the UK, the CFRE to me has been really useful. Now, it's worth acknowledging that it's certainly not as prominent in the UK or EMEA region as it is in the US. So how did I first hear about it? Well, meeting CFRE was crucial to me. I met a mentor of mine, actually, was the CFRE, an ambassador in the UK. When he, a few years ago, the CFRE, he had a little pin badge on his lapel, and I asked him what it meant, and then he explained to me, and then I thought, wow, I want to be part of that. So I really felt like I wanted to sort of get in there and sort of learn what it was and develop myself, and he was crucial in walking me through all of this. Everything that Ashley's talked about this morning has been really useful, and you know, even back in 2015 when I did my CFRE the first time, I didn't have access to some of this material, so it's really come a long way, and it's really valuable information. I echo everything that Ashley has said so far. So about the benefits of being a CFRE, well, I found that it reinforces my knowledge and best practice, so it's a sense of continual learning. Again, I mean, you can go to workshops, conferences and the like, but this is a proper pathway and a proper package of knowledge that's been put together by professionals, by peers in our industry. I keep using that term rigorous again, because you'll see how many, how all the steps you've got to go through in order to gain your points. It's not, you know, a glib thing. It's a serious process becoming a CFRE, and everything that's talked about in the process of gaining your CFRE has been tested multiple times and referenced several times. So I think it really embeds your knowledge in a sound system of professional fundraising learning. It also improves, I think, the perceptions of fundraising in the UK sector. One of the first things I saw when I looked at the CFRE being advertised years ago was it could help your salary. Now, of course, that's a wonderful benefit. I don't think that actually translates in the UK at the moment, because let's say, I don't think people instantly understand the benefits of a CFRE and want to then give you a salary uplift. What it does do, though, is show the wider sector that fundraising is a serious profession, and that you, as a CFRE, hold yourselves to the highest values. And I think that in my conversations with people who don't have a clue what those letters mean, I've actually helped to help them to learn about what I do. And I think it does make a difference when you're perhaps, if you're in a job pile, you know, resumes, if people look at it, CFRE, and they wonder what that is, if they're intrigued about it, they will ask. And the recognition by senior leaders and peers again. So consultants, senior leaders, peers in the sector, they, you know, a lot of them will have heard of the CFRE now. If they don't, as soon as you explain it, they really understand the value of it. And I just think, you know, the more you look into it and ask Ashley and fellow CFREs, the more you see that this is a really sound certification. I'm really enthusiastic about it. I'm a UK ambassador because I want more people to sort of put themselves forward for CFRE. Like Ashley said, it's really not that hard to accrue the points if you're organised and you look at it carefully. You know, in terms of you know, allocating all your points and your training. And I think that everyone on this call should just put themselves forward and consider it as part of their career path. And those are the benefits, and that's why I did my CFRE.
Fabulous. Thank you, Philip, for sharing that. Excellent info there. And we're going to move into our question break here. And I see we have a question here about the exam and if there are study guides or practice tests available. And I'll get into that in just a couple of slides. But yes, we do have study guides and practice tests. We have another question here. Can money that's been raised via grants count towards the professional performance fundraising requirement? And the answer is yes. If you are on the team that has secured a grant, you can absolutely count those funds towards that requirement. All right, so now we'll move into everything to know about the exam. Our exam, if you look at your screen here, is offered during 4 test windows, essentially every month except for December. And each test window has an application deadline. What that means is if I wanted to sit for the exam on January 29th, the last day I could have my application would be January 15th, right? So if I want to sit in that window, that application deadline is the last day that I can get it in. Now, obviously, if you want to sit the exam on January 17th, I do not recommend submitting your application on January 15th because it's going to take us, it takes usually 2 business days for us to review your application, and then we're going to send you instructions about how to schedule your exam, and I'll get into all of that in a couple of slides. But when you submit your application and it's approved, you have 1 year to sit for the exam. Now, obviously, let's say if I submit my application on December 10th, 1 year to sit for the exam would be December 9th. However, as I said, we don't offer the exam in December, so you would actually be looking at November 30th as your last date. But all of that is to say, you have up to a year to sit the exam once your application is approved. It's more than enough time for you to study. So even if life's curveballs come your way, you know, whatever kind of craziness happens, we're all living in this COVID mad world, right? But that 1 year to sit for the exam is a very generous period of time. When you're in your application, you are going to select the test window that you want to sit in. You don't have to tell us the specific date, but you need to tell us the window. And then if you have to change that window, there's a $35 US fee. And the reason for that is we have people that just want to keep pushing it back, right? And that's not good. However, in a COVID world, we realize that you may need to change your window. You feel unwell, someone in your home is unwell, you know, whatever happens. So if you need to change the test window, please rest fully assured that if it's COVID related, there will be absolutely no fee for you. And we mentioned the 1 year to sit for the exam. I think some people feel quite nervous right now to submit their application because they think, I don't know what's going to happen if my area will be on lockdown again. You know, will the test centers be open? I can honestly tell you, if you're not planning to sit for the exam in the next 6 months, don't worry about it. We're in such a fluid situation, and CFRE is incredibly flexible and understanding. So if you submit your application and, you know, for some crazy reason you can't sit for it in a year, I can't really even picture that happening. We just had 209 people sit for and pass the exam in the last 2 months. So, I mean, people are still able to take it. Testing centers are still open. So, but like I said, if you're not going to sit for it in the next 6 months, I wouldn't really lose any sleep over that. Studying. People always say, well, tell me how long I need to study, but there's really not a magic bullet to say for that. But we did a survey a few years ago where people who successfully passed the exam told us how long they studied. And essentially we found that people who had 5 or more years of experience studied for 40 hours or more, and people who had fewer than 5 years of experience studied 80 hours or more. The exam tests at the 5-year level, but remember, you can submit your application if you have 3 years experience, right? That 36-month requirement. So that's why if you don't have the full 5 years of actual time professionally fundraising, we highly recommend that you commit at least 80 hours to the study. And everybody's different, right? So if you've worked in events for the last 10 years and maybe you did 2 years volunteer management, your body of knowledge is totally different to somebody who's done 20 years of capital campaigns only, right? So I'm going to show you in a minute how to determine what you personally need to study, but just keep in mind that it's going to be different for everyone. I am an incredibly frugal person in my day-to-day life, and so I realize a lot of fundraisers also have that great frugality mentality, and so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can get the resources you need without spending much. There are 14 books on our resource reading list, but we only recommend you read 1 to 3. You're only reading what you need to read to address those gaps in knowledge. People see those 14 books and they pretty much have a heart attack. We're not asking you to read 14 books, so just keep that in mind. A number of libraries have these books. If your local library has a budget to order in books on request, you can request that they order the ones that you need. We hear people do that a lot. People will often borrow books from other CFREs they know, or if they know somebody that just happens to have a lot of books, obviously you can buy them if you want. And some of these books now are available as audiobooks, which is awesome because audiobooks can tend to be a lot cheaper than buying that hardcover book. Now, the great question came in earlier, what does the test cover? So if you look at your screen here, you'll see that it's divided into 6 knowledge domains. And we're really transparent about how many questions are in each domain. So you'll see here securing the gift and relationship building together make up 49% of the exam. I always say no matter how much experience you have in those 2 areas, I recommend that you study that because it's absolutely going to serve you well when you are in that testing center. Then you'll note that after that, we have leadership and management with 38 items. So this gives you a really good concept of what you can expect to see. Now, those 6 domains were very high level, right? Just saying current and prospective donor research, that doesn't necessarily tell you precisely what you need to study. We have this test content outline on our website, and it breaks down into the nitty-gritty all of these bullet points for you. So my recommendation is there's a PDF on our website, print that off and grab your highlighter. I would highlight any of these areas where I don't think I would feel confident answering a test question, right? So you'll see down under key knowledge areas for above tasks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th one says donor profile components. Okay, if I'm thinking, crikey, I don't really know much about that, highlight it. Now, what you'll probably note is that either your highlights all cluster in a couple of domains, maybe 1 domain, or you may find that they're all over, right? Throughout all 6 domains, there's something that you are ready to learn that you've not had to do yet on the job, but you're like, yep, I'm gonna need to know this information for the CFRE exam. Well, if you look over here on your screen, this is a screenshot of our resource reading list, and we'll tell you exactly which books cover which domains. We don't want you to spend money or time reading things that aren't applicable to what you're trying to accomplish here, right? So hop on over to our website once you know the knowledge domains that you need to beef up on. A lot of times, like I said, people will borrow books from the library or new CFREs, but another thing people do, and this is probably a little trickier as we're all working from home, some employers will actually purchase the book and say, hey, Mary is going to read this book to prepare for the CFRE exam, but after she's done with it, it can be made available to anyone in our department. So that can be a great way to also encourage other people on your team, even if they're not pursuing their CFRE, to make sure that they're reading, that they're getting the latest info. And if you decide to go forward with a study group, and that's how you want to prepare for the exam, you may want to say, okay, I'm going to buy book 1 and you're going to buy book 2, and then we'll swap. As I told you before, I am an incredibly frugal person, so I'm incredibly pleased to tell you about this. But if you look at your screen here, this is from the amazon.co.uk. I'm not entirely sure about all of the other country sites, but if you'll look here in the middle, you'll see the audiobook is free. with an Audible account trial. So if you're really, penny pinching here, this is a great way. This Achieving Excellence in Fundraising book is a comprehensive textbook that we hear time and time again. People say, it was the only book I used and it fully prepared me. So if you don't yet have this book, I would recommend, if the audiobook interests you and you have free access, feel free to take a look at it over there on Amazon. We offer a variety of free resources. I've mentioned the test content outline. We also have a PDF study plan template that will take you through either an 8-week or a 16-week study course for yourself. It's not probably course is a strong word, but basically if you're a person that finds it difficult to stay on track like I do, it really helps for me to say, okay, on week 1, this is what I'm going to review. On week 2, this is what I'm going to review. And we've had a question if I'll send the PowerPoint out, and I will send the slide deck in the follow-up email. Study groups, we have a page on our website where people tell us about study groups they're running. It's pretty cool because now most of them are online, so you could join from anywhere in the world. We also have a tip sheet in case you want to start your own study group. Once you start your application, you will automatically get access to CFRE Central, which is our online community. And that is a fabulous resource if you're preparing for the exam, because people in there will ask a ton of questions. Hey, how many hours did you study? I'm using this book. Do you think that's a good idea? Did that help you? And obviously, we don't recommend reading anything not on the resource reading list because it's not guaranteed to help you. But CFRE Central is a great resource. We have a candidate handbook, which is probably more than you'd ever want to know about the CFRE process. It's very, very, very in-depth about all of the steps. We have a glossary, and the glossary is the language of the exam. So let's say I'm in Italy and I'm thinking, okay, I use some terms, some English fundraising terms, but I'm not really sure that it's the exact same terms that would be used by the CFRE exam. And people in Canada and the US, Australia, they have those exact same issues too, because while the exam is offered only in English, there are many flavors of English around the world, right? So our glossary solves that problem for you. It'll say, when we say stewardship, this is what we mean. When we say gift, this is what we mean. So it takes out all of that unknown factor of what the language of the exam is. And we also have a video on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you just search for CFRE exam, setting yourself up for success, you will find a link to our video that's 1 hour that goes very, very in depth about preparing and what to expect at the exam center. People often say, well, what is this exam like? I'm really terrified. I haven't taken an exam since uni. All right, well, the exam is global. So if you sit for the exam in Bordeaux, or you sit for the exam in Stockholm, or you sit for it in Warsaw or Dubai, it's all the exact same exam. It's totally computer-based, and it is done at a testing center, which I'll tell you about in a minute. We are trying very hard to have it so you can take the exam from home, but because we're accredited, it is an incredibly long process. We've been working on this for months and months. So by the time you sit for the exam, there's a possibility, I can't guarantee anything, that maybe you would be able to take it from the comfort of your home or office, but presently it is computer-based at a testing center. We don't ask you any tax or country-specific questions. So no one's going to come to you and say, okay, well, in Egypt, what is gift receipting like? And in Switzerland, what do I need to do in this major donor scenario? There's nothing like that, right? The exam is looking at best practices at that 5-year practice level. It's 200 multiple choice questions. So if you feel nervous, I always tell people the right answer is staring you in the face. It is right there in front of you. There are 4 options per question, and what we're looking for is the best answer. So more than one of them may look right, but only one of them can be the best. A really great tip, if you're stuck between 2 possible answer options, is to ask yourself, what is the most donor-centric answer? And a lot of people find that that's a great way to kind of break that mental tie. You have 4 hours to sit for the exam, and this is a very generous amount of time. We get all of the data back from the test centers on how long it takes people to complete it. The average time is just under about 3.5 hours, and that includes time that people take to go back and check their answers, right? So this isn't the kind of thing where at 3 hours and 58 minutes, you're going to have 15 questions to go. If you keep yourself moving, you should be fine. We are very fair in the amount of time we offer. Every question is going to tie back to a point on the test content outline, so nothing is going to be a surprise to you. And it's super cool because inside the exam, you can move backwards and forwards. If I look at question 24 and I go, oh my gosh, I do not know the answer to this. But then I get to question 111 and it jogs my memory about question 24. I can just pop back on over to question 24. The score range is 200 to 800 and 500 is the passing score. It is weighted. The psychometrics behind it are far too in-depth for me to cover on this webinar, but we have all that information on our website. And our pass rate is about 80%. So as far as a professional certification, that's really in line with what other certifications are. And I always tell people, if it had a 100% pass rate, you would tell me it was a joke, right? So the 80% pass rate is very fair, very doable. And please don't think catastrophically. People start thinking about failing the exam before they've even started their application, right? We know we've got to have a good mindset when we go into this. So if you come back to your screen, we're going to look at a sample question. This is not on the actual exam. When visiting a senior donor in a nursing home, should a family member be present? A, if one is available, include a family member. If not, include staff. B, if the donor is mentally sound, a family member is not required. C, yes, a family member should be present anytime you visit a donor in a nursing home. Or D, if a gift is being discussed or agreed upon, then a family, witness, or power of attorney must be present. So I'll give you a second to think on that. All right, and the correct answer is D, because if you want to just visit a donor in a nursing home and you want to talk about the World Cup, you want to talk politics, whatever, you don't need to have anybody there. But if you're going to be talking about a gift, you should. And now Phillip is going to tell us a little bit about how he studied for the CFRE exam.
Yeah, it was back in sort of 2015. So some of the online functions, the community didn't exist back then, and they're fantastic resources to draw upon now. I'm subscribed to the list, and you see every day some fantastic questions and very supportive community. But I think that the key thing for me was making contact with any other fellow CFREs in the UK, and potentially meeting them if I could, and just sharing ideas about best practice and how to approach the exam. I think the reading material, if you look at all of it, it's based upon, each document is referenced, each question is referenced to reading material, so the recommended reading really is important, and it still sits on my bookshelf now, and I share it with my colleagues. So I did make the decision to buy some of it. Actually, my employer got me a couple of the books as well, and they're used still now as references by me. So they're good real-world books that you can apply, ongoing basis. And I set aside time to study. I think it's important, if you have a really supportive boss, that you build it into your work day. I mean, it's good, obviously, study at night if you can, but if you can make it part of what your actual job is, then I think you'll set yourself a good 40 hours, 80 hours, however long you feel you need, but just make sure you feel like you've put the effort in. It's not a simple test. It's not just something you do. A multiple choice quiz is how people often describe these things, and it's much more serious than that. You need to really get in the mindset of doing it the right approach, and you need to think how there's no, like Ashley said, sometimes there is the most right answer. Not every answer is right or wrong. It's not all black and white, and you have to get into the mindset of what they're asking in the CFRE exam. So what I did was, I guess I should admit to you, actually, the first time I did the CFRE, I failed. I didn't quite make the cut. And I came back in the next testing window, and what I did, I think what happened with me really was I overthought some of the questions. I went back again, spoke to some colleagues, fellow CFREs, and they supported me, and I really sat down and I just approached each question methodically, and we got through it, and it was amazing. The reward is brilliant. When you get out of there, of the testing window, and you get an immediate result, it's a yes, you know, you feel so good about it, and it's something you don't have to do again. If you recertify every 3 years, you'll never have to sit the exam again, which is my incentive for staying a CFRE.
Excellent. Thank you again, Philip. So the testing centers, I just have an example here for London, but they're worldwide. Our partner is called Pearson VUE, and they have thousands and thousands of test centers in 190 countries. And you can go over to this URL that you see on your screen here, and then you can type in your postcode, and it will show you all of the testing centers near you. They tend to be pretty much in every major city, smaller cities, sometimes they're on university campuses, all kinds of places. Now, the CFRE exam is usually given in a room that looks more or less like this. There's going to be security cameras. You're going to have individual testing stations. Right now, during COVID, they have very, very stringent protocols in place for cleaning. You must wear a mask the entire time. We had a question come in about if you can take in a notepad with you. And you cannot. However, they will provide you either with a piece of paper and a pencil so that you can write down those questions you want to go back to, or they will give you a dry erase board with a dry erase marker. But it's super secure, so you can't bring your phone in. They usually have lockers, or people will, leave it in their car or at home. But feel really comfortable in the knowledge that this is very, very secure. So we don't want people taking pictures of questions on the screen and that kind of a thing. When you finish, like Philip said, you're going to know straight away if you passed or not. You're going to get that score in the test center. But you won't see what questions you got right or wrong, and that's to protect the integrity of the exam. We don't want you to go to your colleague, Delphine, the next day and say, hey, when you see that question about capital campaigns, you want to pick such and such answer, right? That's why we don't tell you what you got right or wrong. And then within 1 business day, you're going to get a confirmation email from us, and then feel free, shout it from the rooftops, you're a CFRE. Anywhere you want to put it, go ahead and put it. And then we mail our certificates monthly from just outside Washington, D.C. So if you're wondering when you're going to get your certificate, it could be about 6 weeks. We have very, very messy mail right now, which I think is kind of a global news story. But anyway, just keep that in mind. You will get that digital badge within a week. So if you need proof, somebody challenges you, did you really earn your CFRE? Well, you're going to have the badge. We also have a Find a CFRE tool on our website where people can search your name and verify that you're a CFRE that way. I'm really surprised. This is the first time I've given this webinar and nobody's asked me what happens if you don't pass the exam. So hopefully everyone's thinking really positive thoughts here. If you do need to retake it, there's a 30-day stand down period and there is a retake fee. Don't worry about this retake fee because you're going to study really hard the first time and you're going to put all your effort into that first attempt. There's a maximum of 3 attempts on 1 application. I can tell you this pretty much never happens. I know of 1 person that it happened to, and she got really upset with me and said, I've failed your exam 3 times. And I said, can you tell me how you studied? And she said, well, I don't have time to study. I'm not studying. Okay, well, so do not take a page out of that person's book. And like I said, study thoroughly that first time. You'll be well prepared. Over 50% of CFREs tell us that their employer contributed to part or all of the cost of that certification fee. So don't be shy in discussing it, especially if you're moving to a new job. That's a great time to get stuff built into your contract. We also have people that cut a deal with their employer and say, look, I'll pay for this up front. And when I pass the exam, I want you to reimburse me. And that's a great incentive for you to even study harder, right? Your employer, like Philip said, maybe they're going to want to buy the books for you and be supportive of your study time. We recommend that you take off from work the day before your exam. I don't want to sit my exam on Saturday and then at Friday have the absolute worst day at work ever. And I've got an angry board member yelling at me on the phone, right? I don't want anything knocking me off my game. I'm going to take that day off before. I'm not going to cram, but I'm just going to chill and I'm going to get into that good frame of mind. And when you talk to your boss, say, look, I'm going to set an example for the team. And we all know ethics and accountability are very front of mind for donors and grant makers. Unfortunately, we've had the Oxfam scandal. There's been a number of things that have happened in many countries around the world that have eroded donor confidence. So having your CFRE and showing that you're upholding ethics and accountability is really important. And who doesn't want more proficient staff? That's exactly what your boss hired you for, right? They want you to be smart, but they want you to get smarter and grow your skill set while you're on their team. Phillip alluded to recertification. So you recertify every 3 years. And as he said, you don't have to take the exam again. It's totally an online application. Very easy, very straightforward. And you can see what the recertification fee is on your screen here. A lot of people get that built into their next employment contract. If you become a CFRE in 2021 and in 2022 you move jobs, you can say, look, in 2024, I'm going to have to recertify with CFRE. Would you cover the cost of that? So that can be one approach. And to recertify, these are the points requirements on your screen. You'll see here, there's 45 points in continuing education. Very, very achievable. 15 points per year with all of this fabulous online fundraising content available now. You need 30 points in professional practice, which essentially means you need to work for 30 months out of that 3-year period. If you don't, because of maternity leave, medical leave, you're made redundant, contact us and we'll be willing to work with you. You're not going to lose your CFRE because you're on maternity leave or you were made redundant, for a couple of months. So just contact us. We're super happy to work with you. And 40 points in professional performance. If you haven't started your application yet, you can hop over to our website. There are 2 spots on our homepage where you can start it. It's totally free, like we've said. You're only going to pay once you need to submit it. So your next steps would be to start your application and go back and log as much information as you can. Go through your calendar, make sure you don't miss out on any of that education that you did. Moving forward, every time you attend something, log it in there, right? So today you're getting 1 point in fundraising education for this webinar. I would go straight away, log it before you forget. And speak to your boss about supporting your CFRE journey. If the timing's not right, that's fine. You're a fundraiser, you know all about fabulous timing and conversations. All right, so we have a couple of minutes left. If there are any further questions, feel free to type them in the pane. I do have one here. If I teach non-fundraising courses like creative writing, can I get education points? And unfortunately, you cannot, because we can only give points for when you present fundraising related education. So something like creative writing would be outside of that scope. All right, so it looks like we don't have any other questions that have come in. I will email out a link to the recording of this webinar and the slides within the next 24 hours. And if you have any questions, please email us at succeed@cfre.org. We are very responsive. We will be more than happy to work with you. I would also like to thank Phillip and everybody who took the time to be on this call today. So have a fabulous rest of your week, and we look forward to reviewing your application. Take care.